Thank you for clicking on to the Taliesin Antiques YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about buying antiques and vintage pieces at auctions. Alright then, well this video was originally going to be about just showing you a auction haul that I brought back to the unit this week. And I was just going to go through them and just talk to you through why I bought them and what my strategy was going to be. But I thought I'd make it into a bit of a bigger video and just give some insight and some tips into why I buy at auction and how I approach it, all that type of thing. So if you're unfamiliar with me, I'm Kieran, I'm an antiques dealer, I'm based in South Wales. I have a website which is taliesinantiques.com where I sell my items. I also have a retail shop in the Pumping Station Antique Centre in Cardiff, and I sell on all sorts of platforms online, including eBay, including Vinted now. I also now sell on Vinteria and another website called Antiques Boutique. So I'm selling all over the place. What I need is stock, and I need to be buying it at the right price. Auctions is one of those places that I do that. Now, there's a number of different places I buy from. Generally, the best value and the cheapest things are going to be in places like car boot sales, markets, that type of thing. Auctions is usually the other end of that. That's where you're going to be spending the most amount of money. But for me, there's still a place for them. The reason for that is, well, I'll start with the first one, which is the variety and quality of the pieces that you get there. Generally, not always, but generally they are better. People most of the time know they've got something good and they want to get as much money as they can for it. So the chance of them taking it to a car boot sale is slim, possible, but not, more than likely. A lot of the time they do take it to auctions, and that's where people like myself have an opportunity to buy them. Second of all, if you were to go on Google Maps and just check auctions in your local area within, say, an hour's drive, you might be surprised by how many there are around. And all of them, when they have a sale, are selling hundreds of items. Sometimes one piece in one lot. Sometimes it's a whole job lot of items in one go. So whereas most of the time they do reach their market value, there's always going to be ones that slip through the net, where they just don't either. There's a number of reasons for that. It could just be that the buyers aren't there on that particular day. It could be the auctioneer's made a mistake. All sorts of things. But they do, and people like myself, dealers, can come in, get them at a good price, and then make good profit on them. So that's the reason I use auctions. Now I'll just talk you through how I go about it and how I try and make sure I maximise my opportunity to get a good deal and minimise the possibility of me making a mistake. Okay, so the way I'm going to do it is I've got 5 key areas which centre around buying at auctions, and I'll give you a small overview and then just some of my tips, things I do to make sure I get the best deal possible. If you're a dealer, hopefully that's going to be useful if you're trying to make a good profit. If you're just buying for yourself, well, you still want to get the best deal and not overspend, so this will be helpful to you as well. After I've done that, we'll have a look through the haul I was talking about earlier on. So the key point I'm going to make, and all the points are going to centre around this, is being prepared, doing your research and being disciplined and being realistic about your chances. This is crucial. We have to remember there's going to be hundreds, maybe even thousands sometimes, of other dealers and collectors who are doing the same as us. They're all trying to get that deal. So even if you think you spotted something which is going to be, make you hundreds of pounds, the chances are there's going to be someone else. You just got to keep plugging away until that actually comes through to fruition. So the research starts, and that's the first point I'm going to be talking about. That starts when the catalogue comes out, usually a week before. Can vary depending on the auction house. Always check this. Some of them do it weeks before, sometimes only a couple of days before, but most around a week before. What I do is when that comes out, I just go through that catalogue, and it can be 300 odd, maybe even 500 items, but I will just make a note of the ones that just catch my eye, which meet that test based on my own research, experience, things that I sold in the past, all that type of thing that I think, yeah, that's for me. Also, of course, I look at the estimate, because if the estimate's way out of my budget, then there's no point in me even listing it, or making a note of it. I just skip it by. So after this first pass, I've got my list. I then make a decision of, am I going to bid on this auction or not? So if I decide I'm going to go ahead, I start looking into these listings in more detail. I'll go through the descriptions. I'll zoom in on the photos. I'll do research. I'll look up comparable sold items. I might use, for example, Google Image Reverse Search, which is a really good, helpful tool for dealers to getting a good start on our research. But just remember, that's the start of your research, not the end of it. A lot of the time, the first things to show up are not the right prices or even the right items sometimes. So then I've done my research. After that, I'll start budgeting and decide, right, what am I willing to spend on this? I'll go on to budgeting and bidding as a separate section. Just a couple of points around this part of the process. If it's near the auction house, that is, it's always going to be best to actually go to the auctioneer, go to the auction house and view the items, seeing them in person. There's nothing like it. Pictures will never do an item justice. You might see little details that the auctioneer's missed. It could be a mark, it could be a condition issue, it could be a range of things. I'll give you an example. I once bought a job lot of metal brass items, as it was described. It's just a picture zoomed out of this table full of brass. When I went to look at it in person, there was actually a Chinese bronze censer, which I believe was 19th century, could have been 18th century. That's all for £750. I bought the lot for about £100. So it goes to show what can happen if you go down there and just put that extra effort in. The other point I'll make with auctioneers is that it's not like buying on eBay or other marketplaces. They make it clear that items are sold as seen. Okay, so if you buy the item, you don't have a lot of recourse a lot of the time to go back and complain about that. They might hide behind that and say, look, you had the opportunity to come and view, you had the opportunity to get a condition report. If you didn't do that, you're stuck with the item. It depends on the auction house. Some are more, some are, like everywhere, I guess. Some have better customer service than others, but that's just something that you have to be aware of beforehand. Do your research and just make sure you're comfortable with what you're buying. Alright, next we're going to talk about collecting your items or arranging postage. So this is a big factor, because if you're going to go down the postage route, that's extra cost. And this is another big point with auctions. The hammer price, which is the price when the auctioneer puts their hammer down, is only the first cost you got to worry about. You've got other things which I'll come on to. Postage could be one of them. Now, what I try and do is I prefer to collect my items where possible. I very rarely go for a postage option, so I just look at auction houses within about an hour's drive. Although if the auction is pretty good and it's one I got an interest in a lot of different items, I have driven up to 2 hours. That's each way, 2 hours each way, that is. So that's a problem though. That's a trap that you can fall into, which I've done plenty of times. If you're traveling further and you've bought an item, so say I bought early on one listing, it puts pressure on those other lots then, because I start thinking, well, I'm going up there, I want to justify this trip, I want to get a few deals. So, and then, I start maybe having to bid on other items to make sure that trip is worth it. So you can prepare for that, and that's what I try and do. I try and identify early on in the auction some lots, and I think if I secure them at the price I want, then I'm going. And then it's worth the trip. Maybe even sometimes I've had it where I thought, well, that one listing, if I win that at the right price, that's worth the trip alone. So that's something I plan ahead. And if I am going up there, I might give myself a little bit of leeway when I'm budgeting. So there's one thing to think with collection and just being careful of, is just not getting caught in that trap. If you don't get carried away, sometimes you've got to think that just because you're going up there, the fuel and all that sort of stuff to get up there doesn't always justify spending loads of money on the item. You still have to bear in mind, is there actually a profit to be made? Or if you're a collector, am I overspending on this? Could I just get it elsewhere for cheaper? Now we'll go on to postage, because that's another issue. It can be really expensive. Now some auction houses, and the better ones in my opinion, I don't understand why every auction house doesn't do this, because it just maximizes your customer base. A lot of them offer really good postage services, they put really good care and attention into it and offer a fair price. They do charge you for labour, which they have every right to do, but some of them don't overcharge you on that. It's just a reasonable cost, and then it's still worth your while to get it posted. Then it's not eating into your profits and adding to your costs. Others do offer postage and they can be really expensive, and then others again don't offer postage at all, and they use third-party mailing couriers, and let me tell you now, they can be extortionate. That's the only way I can put it. I've never had a good quote from one, and I've tried several. Usually the cost is way beyond what I've spent on the item, so the idea of buying that item and then paying for postage is just out the window, because it makes no sense. I've lost all my profits. So this is, again, going back to those key points. Look this up beforehand. You can check on the auction house's website on their terms and conditions. You can look at their shipping policy. Do they want you to collect the items? Another thing I haven't mentioned is sometimes they have a limit and they say you need to collect this within 3 days or we're going to charge you storage costs. So be aware of that before bidding. And then when it comes to postage, understand postage costs. Do they do it in-house? Do they give you a price? Can you get a quote from them beforehand? If they don't, and they only got the courier and they only offer the third party couriers, then hopefully you got a lot of money, because usually it's not worth your effort, but that's just my opinion. Well, the next area is commission costs, and this is where a lot of beginners get caught out when first buying at auctions. So when you buy an item, the hammer price is what the auctioneer says is basically what the item sold for. Say it's £25. Now on top of that, what they don't mention is their commission fee. And now these can vary, and they vary based on the auction house. Some can be as low as, I think the lowest I've seen is like 21% these days. They used to be lower than this, but these days around 21%. The highest I've seen most recently is 36%. But personally, I just think that's beyond belief. Who that affects most of all is the person selling the item, who they're selling the item on behalf of, because the buyer's just going to spend less money because they don't want to pay the auction commission. But there we go. So I just want to make a point about VAT as well. So VAT is on the commission cost, not on the item, 99% of the time. The only time that you get VAT cost on the item, on the hammer price, is if the auction is selling on behalf of a business that has to pay VAT. I'm pretty sure they have to make this clear, so you shouldn't get caught out by that. If they don't mention it, I think you have every right to say, I'm not happy about this, and maybe even cancel the offer. So that's something you've got to be very careful of, is those commission fees. They rack up, and if you start, if you're spending a lot of money, 20 odd percent, 36% if you haven't checked, that's a lot of money and can be the difference between getting a good deal and paying way too much. The next point, the next commission cost you have to be aware of, which again a lot of people miss, is if you're bidding online and if you're bidding via a third-party platform. There's a couple of these. The most common ones in the UK are SalesRoom and EasyLive. I think there's also Live Auctioneers, and there may be a couple of others. Now all of these will have their own platform commission cost that goes on top of the auctioneer one. So you need to check that beforehand. Just my own personal approach that I try and take. First of all, I try and log in and see if the website has their own online platform, which a lot of them do, and that removes the cost of the SalesRoom EasyLive's commission. So always check that. It's worth just registering on their website and getting that few percentage off. If they don't offer that as a service and they have an option between EasyLive or SalesRoom, I usually go for EasyLive because they offer a flat £3 registration fee per auction, and that usually works out a lot better than paying commission on each one you win. So there we go, that's commission. That is again another thing you have to check beforehand, or you might get lost in spending too much. Right, next points are going to be around condition and description. Now, as I said earlier, remember auction houses is not like buying off eBay or on a website. They have, and they make this clear to be fair, a lot of the time at the start of the auction, this is sold as seen items. They're selling hundreds of things. They usually just want to move them on. They don't get in, they don't always go into full detail, and they kind of expect their customers to do a lot of the work. Now, when you go onto the catalogues, and if you go to different auction houses, you'll notice that it does vary to the extent that they write their descriptions and they do photos. And I think the best ones do go to the extra effort of doing good photos and being very descriptive on condition. And it's not always a high-end one. It's not always, the ones who you spend more money at that do this. Sometimes it's the ones who are down, expect less money in commission, but just go to that extra effort, because I think they see that it just builds good relationship with their customers. So you have to be careful on that. You may not always get a full description or full photos and see exactly what you bought. So as mentioned earlier, ideally you can get down there and inspect these items for yourself. If you can't do that and you want to spend good money on these items, it's best to always request a condition report for every lot that you're interested in. The auction then will send you a report with further photos and be very descriptive about the item and tell you all the condition issues they can find. They have to do this because you can say afterwards, well, ask for a condition report, and if they don't mention it there, they're a lot more liable to have to refund you or discount you. So this is always something you have to do. Now, a little tip that I picked up. I have noticed when you do that, a lot of the time, the auctioneer will just save other people asking them. They'll just put all that information on the listing themselves, so other people then go on the list and they'll see all this. So if you want to try and get an edge and you want to get this information and not let everyone else onto that, then of course, you can do it closer to the auction, or maybe even just call them up and ask them to describe it over the phone. You can probably ask them to email it afterwards, but that's the only way you can maybe get that edge. So that's it really. If you get something and you go to the auction, you bought it and the condition is not that good, as I mentioned earlier, there's not a great deal of recourse. I've had a couple of examples where I've pointed it out to the auctioneer. If it's a small thing and I haven't asked for a condition report, I just accept that's my fault, I should have done it. If it's a big thing, you know, big crack down a vase or something like that, I will point it out to the auctioneer and say, look, I think this could be mentioned. To their credit, most of the time, they will just refund you, offer you a refund, maybe even a discount, and I take them up on that. But you have to be careful because they're not obligated to in their view. So there we go. Right, so the last section is around budgeting and bidding. Now these are obviously very crucial because there's a difference between getting something at a great price where you're very happy with it and ending up spending way too much money. So this is going to vary depending on your own situation and your own circumstances. If you're a dealer, then of course you want to be able to make a good profit. So you're going to base it on your budget and whether you see the value still in that item based on your research. If you're a collector, you might be willing to spend a bit more because you want that item, but you also have to make sure you consider this beforehand and think, well, can I get an item elsewhere for a better price? Take into account all those other costs I mentioned earlier and just make the best decision. It comes down to discipline. It's very easy in an auction to get swept up in the bidding and end up overspending. I've done it plenty of times myself. You know, I think it happens to everyone at different points, whether on the internet or in person. You can just get caught up in that frenzy. So you have to learn to be disciplined and respect the decision you made early on. That was based on logic and reason. So you're going to be that was a much better decision than what you're making in an emotional moment. So that's the key point. You know, I do give myself leeway sometimes. So if I haven't successfully bought other items like I was bidding on, I haven't spent that money, then I might give myself a bit of leeway. But you can plan in advance for that. You know, you can always say, well, you can always give yourself that leeway on your notes. So just a few tips when actually bidding. Keep in mind that auctioneers all have different styles. Some, and most to be fair, will start high and then just gradually go down low until they get their bid that they're after. Some of them start very low and just work their way up. What you just have to get an eye for is just how that auctioneer is doing things, and just get a feel for it. Maybe, you know, watch their videos, just see how they do things, because some of them will let things go down to the lowest they're willing to accept, and they will then say, right, that's the lowest price, bid now. And that's what you want to do. You want to hold your nerve and get it for as little as possible. Don't go straight in and just bid for the price that you want to get it for. You try and get it for as little as possible. Some, to be honest, I don't know why they do this, but they do, won't even tell you they're going to pass it. They just say that they get to their lowest point and then just pass it without saying anything. Like, God knows why they do it. They end up not selling the item and it just goes back to the person who was selling it or wherever else it came from. So that's just something to be very wary of as well. Just work out how they do things. And just also remember that it could be the difference between you getting a good deal and overspending could just be one other person. One other person could have spotted what you spotted and you end up getting a bit of a bidding war with them. That's actually quite easy to end up overspending because you will get like a feeling you want to beat them. Even if you're online and you don't meet them, sometimes you think, well, I want to outbid this person. Just stick to your guns, just stick to what you decided earlier on. That's always going to be the best way. And the final point I'll make is often you're bidding against the reserve rather than an actual person. So the reserve is the price that has been set to say we will not sell it less than this. Say it's at £50, an auctioneer might start the bidding at £30, you bid 30, they do 32, 35, and it goes up. But you're actually just bidding against the reserve, not the person. Stick to your guns, even if the auctioneer says, that they're bidding against the reserve. Don't just bid it up until you get past it. Stick to your guns, stick to what you've decided beforehand. Sometimes you can actually still get that price below the reserve. If it does get passed, you message the auction house afterwards, ask them if they're willing to sell it at that price. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's no harm in asking. At least you then know that you've got the price at the best offers. So there we go, that's budgeting and bidding. Alright then, well that's it for now. They're my tips. If you have any of your own that I've missed, then please share them in the comments. But ultimately, the main goal is to avoid surprises, whether it be cost, condition, quality, postage, collection, all that sort of stuff. Just make sure you do your research beforehand, before you get bidding, and then you should be okay. And then just stick to what I'm not going to say stick to your guns again, because I think I said it about 10 times in the last section, but just stick to what you planned beforehand. Now let's have a look at the auction haul I picked up this week. This one was about an hour's drive away. I also, and this is another thing I try and do as well, I try and do other things on that trip to justify that drive. So I actually bought a really nice Davenport desk that I put in the shop this week. So that's something I picked up on the way back actually. So we'll go through each item and then we just talk about the strategy that I usually use and whether it was a good buy or not. Right then, so we're going to start with this box of wax seals. I'll try my best to get on camera. They are quite fragile, so I need to be very careful. There's a nice green one. Got a few more. This is a whole box of them. Now these can date back, I don't know if that's upside down. There we go. These can date back many centuries. A lot of them that you find now are really from the 19th centuries, and these were of course used as a way, so these are the coats of arms of different houses, and when they sent a letter they would use a wax seal to seal that letter. Obviously this means their conditions are not always in the best shape, but sometimes they're okay. There's probably about 15 of these. Now if you get a really good one, say from the 19th century, and they're a very recognisable house, by house I mean kind of the family heirs, family of arms or whatever, they can be really valuable, you know, easily over £100. I recently sold a whole job lot of these, about a similar amount, for about £150 online, so yeah, I was happy to buy these. These were one of the key ones I was trying to get in this auction, and I've spent, hammer price 18, and then the premium, as they call it, so the commission was £4.32, so that's about £22.32, which I think is a good deal on that one, so I was happy with this lot. Okay, the next lot is starts with this one. So this is a little tabletop cabinet. It was described as Oriental, so it said the top was Oriental, which I guess it is. This was, I just thought it was a nice little box, basically. To be honest, I bought this as one of these, I almost call them almost like top-up items. I didn't really want this one, but I just saw potential as something that I'll just put this in my shop, I think, for about £35. As a nice item, especially with the run up to Christmas. It's the sort of thing that people like to keep jewellery, coins, all that sort of thing in. Strangely, this also came with these, which I've never seen before, described as Oriental curtain rails. So I have no idea on the value of them, but there we are, they came with it. On this one I spent £18 again, £4.32 premium, £22. It should be safe money on that one. Not a massive profit, but it should be pretty safe. All right then, so the next lot is a bit of a strange one. So here it is, clearly Victorian. Now described as an uncommon pale puce matte ground pottery, narrow neck flask or carafe, and a few other details. On the base it's inscribed Pompeii, and hang on a minute, wrong way around. I'll be very careful because of the condition of this one. It will say wedding present to Ma and Pa 1861. So we are. There's a bit of interesting social history. I haven't been able to find who Pompeii refers to. The only thing I found on Pompeii is a maker called James Dudson, who did this shape but not this style. So it could be them, and his Pompeii makes were not necessarily like this. There's a lot of repair issues on this, and to be honest, it was a bit of an impulse buy, and I should have, you know, on the reflection, I might have just left it. But I didn't spend a lot on it. It cost me £9 and then £2.16 commission, so £11.16. It also has this place to sit on as well. So there we go. It's one of those. I'll do a bit more research for it. It's got to be, just because of the social history of it, got to be worth at least £25. So again, I think the profits are safe on that one. All right then, so the next one is this tray here. There we go. It's a nice copper tray, arts and crafts style. Now I bought this hoping it would be Newlyn or Keswick, so really good popular copper makers of decorative items. As you can see, it's got this, you should be able to see, it's got a boat race on it. It's good size, you know, very nicely made. On the back, seems to have a decent amount of age just from the patina, and then, you know, you can actually hang on the wall. So yeah, it was one of those items. Got at an auction. This is a pet hate of mine with the auction stickers. They put them on so tight sometimes. It just takes off, especially on metal. It takes off the patina and just it does my head in. There we go. Now how much do I pay for that? Now this is one of those buys that I probably did get carried away. That was £30 hammer price, £7.20 commission. That's £37.20 before you take into account fuel and all that type of stuff. Time even. There's no mark on it that I've found so far. Now Newlyn didn't always mark their pieces, but obviously it's not going to fetch the Newlyn value without it. I might just have to hold out for £60, something like that for this one. Let me know what you think. I think it's a very nice piece, but probably spent too much on that one. Okay, and the final lot for this one was a two-parter. So it starts off with this. This is really nice. It's a silver-plated claret jug or decanter. It's a vintage one, not an antique one. I can just tell just by the screw in the top there for a start. It says silver-plated within there. This is probably, you know, 60s, 70s. Very decorative. It's pressed glass, I think, rather than cut glass. Very nice design. Now, these are just popular. They're really, I go in people's houses when I'm doing house visits and see these used as decorative pieces. They just have a look about them. If you get a silver top one, it can be very valuable. The silver plated ones are very valuable as well if they've got a good name to them and they've got good age to them. So this one I see at £30–35 when being sold. The other item this came with this terrine, I guess it's called, entree dish, silver plated, EPNS. You know, not a lot to shout about, not really a decorative one, but this all back. What does it say here? It is marked. I'll have to do some research on that one, on who the maker was. It's probably early 20th century, maybe Victorian. 15–20 quid, that'll be. So now on that lot I paid £7 and then £1.68 on the commission, so that's £9.68. That's all right. I'm happy with that one. Okay, so that comes to about £105 I spent on that auction haul. Bear in mind I drove up an hour one way, I drove an hour back the other way. I did pick up another item which will get me a decent profit. £105 for on those items. What do I think? Not great, to be honest. Not my best showing. I usually like to do a lot better than that. I'd rather spend a lot more money, which I do a lot of the time, and get really good items that I can make a big thing about. But those ones, I really like the wax seals. There'll be some good time researching them and seeing where they come from and seeing what value they have. I'm pretty confident on them. The one I'm least confident on is going to be the copper tray. I think I'd probably overspent on that one. I can make a profit, but it's not the sort of margins that you want to be. I guess I could look at it as, well, I was going up there anyway after I spent a certain amount, so I might as well make a little bit extra money on that. But there we go. That's one good example where it didn't go totally my way. I had my eye on a lot of different lots which went for too much money, so at least I kept my discipline on those ones, and it just ended up that I didn't get everything I wanted that time. So that happens, and it's part of the game when you bid in an auction. Now I think that's it. That's the video today. Hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you for watching so far. If you're interested in these type of videos, I'm trying to make them weekly. Please subscribe to the channel, like the videos. It does help me out. It does help me go up the algorithm and get more views if you're engaging with it and watching them. If you're interested in buying some antiques, then please head over to my website, taliesinantiques.com. And if you're in Cardiff, go down to the pumping station and have a look around. Great place to go and visit. Only other thing is, well, you can follow me on social media. Instagram's the one I mainly use, so just Taliesin Antiques if you find me there. Thank you so much. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.